privítať oficiálnej konferencii, ale hlavného usporiadateľa, pána rektora Rudolfa Siváka. Veľmi ďakujeme za túto spoluprácu a možnosť organizovať takúto konferenciu. Sme veľmi radi, že môžeme spolupracovať, pretože naozaj za tie roky sa nám podarilo vytvoriť mnoho takých predmetných a dôležitých akcií, kde sa stretávajú slovenskí zahraniční ekonómovia. Už teraz dokážeme povedať, že vzniklo nejaké ovocie tej spolupráce. Takže ešte raz veľmi pekne ďakujem.
Dobré ráno. Dovolte prosím, aby som poďakoval Marošovi Servákovi za úvodné slova. Zároveň, aby som poďakoval, že prišiel medzi nás aj správca nadácie Tatra Banky, pretože tak väzol, ako aj nadácia Tatra Banky je spoluorganizátorom tejto konferencie. Ja vás vítam na Bratislavskej ekonomickom meetingu za vedenie Ekonomickej univerzity. Vítam vás najmä z toho dôvodu, že pred 4 rokmi spolu s Marošom Servátkom a ďalšími kolegami jeho zo zahraničia aj mojimi kolegami sme sa rozhodli, že urobíme také reprezentatívne fórum, kde sa budú každé 2 roky stretávať zástupcovia a jednotlivých univerzít zo zahraničia, že prídu na toto stretnutie tí, ktorí pôsobia na zahraničných univerzitách a zahraničných vedeckých inštitúciách, tí, ktorí majú pôvod zo Slovenska, tí, ktorí majú záujem ďalej rozvíjať táto oblasť ekonomickej vedy, ekonomickej teórie i ďalších skutočností. Takže je pre mňa osobitným potešením privítať vás za vedenie univerzity dnes na akademickej pôde Ekonomickej univerzity, ktorá je najväčšia svojho druhu na Slovensku, ktorá v súčasnosti má 11 000 študentov s tým, že orientácia Ekonomickej univerzity je rozličná na inžinierské a doktoránske štúdium. Spolu s nadáciou Tatra Banky a spolu s Marošom Servátkom a jeho kolegami sme doteraz zorganizovali na pôde univerzity už 5 diskusí s nositeľmi Nobelových cien za ekonómiu. Na tej univerzite máme akreditovaných viac ako 60 svojich programov, predovšetkým na 2. a 3. stupni štúdia, s tým, že pre zaujímavosť máme 5 dvojitých diplomov na univerzite, s univerzitou Nottingham, s univerzitou Grenoble, s univerzitou Halle, s univerzitou Strasburgu a s univerzitou Frankfurtu. Ekonomická univerzita je z hľadiska svojho poslania zameraná tak, že pripravuje absolventov komplexne vo všetkých stupňoch bakalárstva, inžinierstva na doktoránstvo, vo všetkých oboroch ekonomia a manažment. Na univerzite momentálne študuje približne 400 študentov zo zahraničných univerzít, približne rovnaký počet študentov každý rok odchádza z univerzity na partnerské univerzity po celom svete. Máme uzatvorené zmluvy o spolupráci s viac ako 200 univerzitami na svete v rámci výmenných programov Erasmus, Leonardo da Vinci a ďalšie. Na univerzite pravidelne pôsobí 20 až 40 profesorov zo zahraničných univerzít, rovnaký počet približne aj z Ekonomickej univerzity pôsobí na zahraničných univerzitách. Som veľmi rád, že táto tradícia sa dodržiava a že bratislavský vedecký meeting sa stáva už pravidelnou súčasťou pre tých, ktorí sa, ale dúfam, že je to aj tento rok, ktorí sa tešia od posledného meetingu na ďalší, že sa tu znovu stretávame. Veľmi dôležité z hľadiska aj dnešného stretnutia je tá skutočnosť, že zajtra sa bude poriadať hlavné zhromaždenie Slovenskej ekonomickej spoločnosti a verím, že viacerí z vás sa aj tohto hlavného zhromaždenia zúčastníte.
banky. Nadácia Tatra banky je našim dlhoročným partnerom, ktorý nám pomáha uskutočňovať tieto záslužné veci týkajúce sa rozvoja ekonomie a podobne. Pomáhali nám organizovať teda okrem prednášok nobelistov cez rôzne workshopy a konferencie a týmto by sme sa chceli poďakovať za ich podporu.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne za príležitosť pozdraviť vás. Chcem povedať, že nadácia Tatra banky ako svoj prvý a najväčší cieľ má rozvoj vzdelávania. Vzdelávanie vnímame nielen ako oblasť verejnej prospešnosti, ale vnímame to ako jednu z dôležitých sociálnych oblastí Slovenskej republiky, pretože vzdelaní ľudia majú oveľa viacej šanci uplatniť sa vo svojom budúcom živote a vytvárajú vlastne sociálne prostredie každej krajiny. My sa špecializujeme ako nadácia predovšetkým na vysokoškolské vzdelávanie a presne podobné meetingy a stretnutia a diskusie, ktoré organizujeme aj v spolupráci s VZL a s Ekonomickou univerzitou, predstavujú to, čo je pre nás najdôležitejšie. Je to styk vzdelávania s praxou, styk vzdelávania vzdelávacieho prostredia, školského prostredia s poznatkami, s vedou, s odborníkmi a s vedomosťami, či už teda z Slovenska alebo aj z zahraničia. Takže som veľmi rád a je úcťou vás vidieť a privítať a popriať vám veľmi plodné a úspešné sedenie a diskusie a veľa poznatkov z tohto stretnutia. Thank you very much and wish you a very nice day in next 3-2 days. I'm very pleasure to see you and
let me introduce Martin Kahanec, the director of the Center of European Labor Institute, and Martin is actually organizing Bratislava Economic Fair, which is running parallel to the Bratislava Economic Meeting. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely happy to be here the fourth time. I would like to congratulate the organizers of Bratislava Economic Meeting. This is really fantastic. And as Maroš and others mentioned, the idea is to bring economics, all economics back home and have a conference where we can interact. But I thought, well, there is maybe another objective like the conclusion, that is to connect people who are abroad with those who are in here, the local experts. So, well, this is of course part of the Bratislava meeting, because we have of course speakers from abroad, but also speakers from Slovak universities, Slovak research institutions. But next to it, I thought, well, there are many practitioners, many institutions, organizations which are active in the field, and I'm quite convinced that it's important to connect all these communities, and that's why we started some years ago to organize so-called Bratislava Economic Fair, which is bringing institutions which are active in economic research, economic policy, and that we create conditions or platform for exchange of ideas and maybe for all kinds of cooperations. And as an example of the fact that, well, we do research here also in Slovakia, you see the questionnaires on your desk. This is research done by Faculty of Management, so if you belong to the target population, we are invited to fill it in and submit the questionnaire somewhere. I think it must be written somewhere in the questionnaire where you should submit it, so it will be much appreciated. And I think I stop here. I would like to invite you to see the stands where we introduce the institutions. It's right behind the corner here. There are also publishers who will introduce some books. I think you can also buy some books there. There are universities, think tanks, several institutions, so you are invited to chat with them, to interact, to see what they do, what they produce, and maybe this will lead to some productive cooperation in the future. So let me just wish you a wonderful conference, and have fun.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope you had a nice break and a good lunch. It is my great pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Julius Horvat. Meanwhile, outside. So Julius is a professor at the Central European University. I had the pleasure of knowing him for quite a few years now. And again, it's our great pleasure that he accepted to be our keynote speaker. This one of the main reasons, like I mentioned in the morning, right, of this conference is to try to promote Slovak economic thinking and sort of help educational and research activities here in Slovakia. Julo has been doing this for many years. Earlier from the Academia Metropolitana, and later as a professor from the Central European University, coming to Slovakia and sort of interacting with Slovak students, etc. The title of his talk is actually very close to what we're trying to do, right? It's about the emergence of Slovak economic thinking, so it's sort of historical perspective from the 18th century until Imre Karol, the first governor of the Slovak Republic. So again, it's my great pleasure to welcome you.
We first, of course, need to begin and wish good health and good luck to Jan Záborník, who could not come to the lecture, who was to provide a completely different type of lecture on micro-industrial organization. Going to my lecture, basically the issue is history of economic thought. So in the Journal of Economic Literature, it's B1, B2, B3. It's to an extent a peculiar topic because it deals with a contribution of people in these lands to maybe general, or at least continental, or at least Central European, or at least Slovak economic evolution of economic thought. If you take, of course, a typical class or course of history of economic thought, then you don't meet much people from, let's say, even from the Austrian world or monarchy or Central Europe. So in that sense, it's a peculiar issue. There are a lot of problems with that topic. Yeah, there is the issue of identity, issue of nation, of language, and different things. And plus there is a question of the time. So what time period one should cover in this lecture. So let me begin first with the structure, or how the structure really should like if the lecture is proper. Yeah, and then we can have a lecture and you judge the lecture. So one need to begin, I begin with some methodological comments like about the discipline history of economic thought, such comments which might have connection to the later parts. And then say some general comments on Slovak economic history, very general comments. Then it is how actually I begin to be interested in such a topic. It was in 2002 when a big German publishing house was organizing encyclopedia about economic thinking, actually economic sociology and political science, and I wrote that my first paper about evolution thinking. I consulted Jarko Filmuc, who is not here, Jano, Mikil Ptáčik, and a lot of other members of our society. And from part 4, basically, the proper lecture begins, which is, we go back to some time before the reform period of Maria Theresia, 1740, asked this question, what type of economic thinking that time was Slovakia. Then basically there is one famous polyhistor, Martin Sentivani. I can say a word about him. Then next, the period from 1740 to the end of the First World War, and I will say a word about this period. This still can be divided into sub-periods, but I didn't do it. Then one can say a word about the tradition, which is here German-Austrian type of tradition. So it means the issues are seen in administrative or political, so administrative or political eyes. Economics or things which today we would call economics are sub-discipline of administration, of Polizei, actually in the Viennese 18th century dialect, and it altogether belongs to so-called cameralist movement. And I might say some words about cameralism and department, the faculty, the people, and what they teach, how much they were paid in Trnava, I compared to Vienna. Yeah. And there was a high school of economics, something similar in Senec today, at that time called Senec. Yeah, I can say I've heard of that. Yeah. And then it's topic 7, which most of you know, these are those contributions which are connected with the Slovak national movement, some famous names mentioned, number 7, especially, of course, Hoxha at the end. Yeah. Hoxha, of course, Stokola to go to topic 8, there in topic 7. And then comes 1918 and the golden years of Slovak economic thinking. These are the golden years, from 1928 to 1946, 47. You have people from here who are at econometric society meetings, who have scholarship at Stanford, at Sorbonne, and so on. Some of them are of certain brilliance, of course. They introduce the economic science in the territory, most eminently, of course, Professor Imrich Karvaš. Then I will not talk, but that would belong also there. The socialist period is very complicated. What opinion we can have about socialist period? Was there a progressive or a degressive part? Surely there was a lot of progress, a lot of consensus. Maybe not, surely not ideology, but a lot of progress in retooling, like the knowledge in dynamic programming, stochastic processes. A lot of modern things were taught at these schools. A lot of modern things were not. And then, of course, topic number 10, which was one of the reasons for founding the association, is like what's going on today, the export of a lot of the eminent Slovak economists to the world, from Chicago and Bonn and London and Vienna and so on. There was an issue in Forbes, Forbes about this a couple of months ago. Okay? So this is the structure of the talk, and I will, depending on the time, I will go over some of these topics, and then I will just skip maybe some, and then at the end to concentrate at least last maybe 15 minutes to the contribution and the life of Imrich Karvaš. Yeah. So generally, of course, it's no secret thinking about history of economic thought doesn't have a prestige in the mainstream. It's not that easy way to get full professorship at schools being expected specialization. I also do it, at my older age. Yeah. And there are papers about that. Samuelson was one of the proponents early time that economic thought actually should not be taught in the schools, and in the PhD programs especially. It's first a comment, a methodological comment. Second methodological comment, how you should talk about these issues. Yeah? There are two main schools in the history of economic analysis. One is take the modern knowledge, so where do we stand in some understanding of some problem, and then try to go past in history and redress the old people to the modern, modern suit, and see through this way their contribution. That's so-called rational reconstruction school. Paul Samuelson, Negishi, Jürgen Mihans, and others are the main proponents. That would make no sense to me. The continuity is much more difficult to establish. So what I do, and also maybe sort of closer to my spirit, it's what's called historical reconstruction. So intellectual history, the Geistesgeschichte. Yeah? This is like Swiderski, or of course Schubert and Keynes, and other great people who write about economic history. Yeah? It's then a question, of course, you know, how much you need to know to have an opinion about, let's say, a period, you know, 30, 40 years of socialism, 40 years after the First World War. How you should form your opinion? You say it's a progressive or degressive. Yeah? What do you need to know? Yeah? So if you learn from Keynes, for example, Keynes always looks, if you look his biographies, you know, a lot of 10 or 12 biographies of his colleagues or the older generation of British economists. Keynes always look to the stock. So what is the stock you are coming from? What's your family background? What's your individual psychology? What's your upbringing? What's your religion? And so on and so on. Yeah? To an extent, yeah, that matters. Yeah? To an extent, that matters. Yeah? Maybe our, you know, differences in our views, especially in the ideology, how we see economics, maybe sometimes, I quote Modigliani, Franco Modigliani, maybe sometimes begins before we enter the history. Modigliani has a paper where he says the difference between him and Friedman began before they entered economics. These are the gurus of the 1960s, one of course Keynesian and the monetarist. Okay? Also, you know, in a history of economic thought, it's very difficult, you don't want to be only objective. You are objective, you know, and you are bloodless. Yeah? So the history of thought, especially in a periphery country, so that in this perspective is full of, you know, passions, hatreds, blood, killings and things like that. We have a lot of eminent economists whom we don't know where they are buried. Yeah, not in Slovakia only. Kondratiev, maybe Manolievsky, a lot of economists disappeared. Yeah? So it's also good if you want to give a picture about our region, the East or Central Eastern Europe, you need to be aware of that. The big history of economic thoughts, you know, they run, it's another division of how can you do it. You can, of course, do it like until today, the best book on international trade history from Jacob Wiener from Chicago and later Princeton. You know, he just, you know, looks to the theory generally of trade theory, and you can do it by, but I will not do number one. With number two, so it means you look at the evolution of individual thought. As I look on Imre Karvaš, recently there is a great book about Rudolf Briška, there are great books about Milan Hoxha, yeah, from economic, or as they say in Slovakia, narodohospodářský economic view. So look on the evolution of individual thought of the person, how the person began as liberal, ended up as socialist or opposite and things like that. And also what I do, you study the particular periods, so you slice the time, you know, and study it in this respect. Heckscher, mercantilism is the most famous book about it, and that's in such a approach. Of course, there are heroes and villains, yeah, yeah, as also in the Western economic history of thought. Keynes is always a hero in Germany. Yeah, because of his economic consequences of the peace. He was always hated in France. That's also reflected in how the demand management theory or the general theory was accepted. If you would read the reviews in 36, 37 in the French or the German press, you will see the difference. Of course, it's also important, maybe for us, like the golden good generation of 21st century, it's not even so much important to whom you speak to. You think you speak to your peers, fine, this is fine. But generally, you know, a lot of great economics speaks to their times or to certain group of people. You know, Marx maybe spoke more to revolutionaries than others. So it's an important, historically very important, because historically, the evolution of economic theory is dependent on time, place, and national differences. Especially here, the German historical school, you know, the Austrian school, these are, you know, very much trying to be different from, let's say, what is today accepted as a mainstream, which is the Anglo-American view. You know. And of course, in the history of economic thought, you always push in front people with vision. People with vision. Yeah? Yeah, so if you read now, let's say, reviews of Samuel's own life, like by Stanley Fisher recently and others, it's very difficult now to reconnect back to Paul Samuelson because he avoided, maybe on purpose, to vision. He wanted to have a new kind of economic, theory which will be maybe vision, less dependent. But if you go in the past, you will see, the vision is important, and maybe the vision is what helps your analytical effort. Vision is your raw analytical effort before you really begin to do things which we call modern economics. Okay? So these were the first comments, to put, very typical person who try to understand the history of thought, need to place himself or herself. Okay? If I should generally make some general comments on Slovak economic, and this is subjective and not really good, but it's very difficult to make a general comment for such a long time period. I look for help. If you look in the Palgrave dictionaries, Palgrave dictionary from the early 20th century and the new re-edition of Palgrave dictionaries, there you can read history of economic thought in Spain, in Belgium, in small countries, Portugal. So I try to look how they look at their own countries. Yeah. But definitely, as a lot of other countries, you can say there was not a Slovak school of thought which would be accepted, by generally as such. Always you find, basically from the 18th, 19th, 20th century economists, maybe until 1998, I don't know, big emphasis on the nation, role of the nation, national economic progress, later on the progress inside Slovakia, or inside Czechoslovakia. So these elements, is always important because the emphasis of the analysis, if there is any, is on underdevelopment, poverty, inequality, and this type of things. Concept of consumer sovereignty from micro is looked down originally. Hoxha has mentions that. It's just, it's not. Yeah, you understand? So it is a little different. The papers, the pamphlets which people published. So what people published, So basically, maybe until Karvash, it's pamphlets. So it's like mercantilist contribution. Great people of politics or business write their opinion in 10, 20 pages. That's Kornel Stodola doing. These are the leading papers in Narodny and Noviny by Stur in the 1940s or by others. So pamphlets, much less, and some articles, much less what you call today like the paper. There's no referring process. You write it, and then at night and the morning it's in the press. Okay? Influence is relatively quite little until generation. It's here maybe of Anglo-Saxon. We are under influence of the German thinking and Austrian thinking. Austrian here, I don't mean like Mrs. Hayek Austrian school, but rather the old Austrian Cameronism. Okay? And of course the influence of German history. Progress, of course, whom I am to say what's progress? But you can see nature in progress after 1918, especially the First Republic, first Czechoslovakia, until maybe also until 47, 46, surely progress is visible. It's a very complicated issue. I will not touch it, about the professors of the socialist period. The ghost generation is not, what the political economy of socialism, political economy of central planning, and this type of contribution, how much they were appreciated or not. That's maybe also for the future. A lot of one need to touch in such a lecture, of course, pedagogical issues, the schools, education, the terminology. The terminology was a big issue. Even Briška and Karavaš would use, for example, oferta, not ponuka, or nabídka or oferta. But until you establish this activity is called, supply is called ponuka. It's a certain time. Okay. I don't know who is the founder of Slovak economic thought. Maybe Professor Karavaš is the closest, but yeah. So short comments. So at the beginning you say, okay, I I don't even know who are great Slovak economic thinkers. So let me look at the encyclopedias and books and they tell me. So then I begin to look. The super famous Mark Blount, great economist before Keynes. Yeah, that's point 3.1. Mark Blount, great economist after Keynes. Yeah. Basically, even what is in the world are people from the region. The region broadly defined as a former Soviet empire or something. Yeah, probably. Yeah. So you see basically the people who appear there, you know, if the are not coming from other lands, the Russian or Slutsky or Kondratiev or Lang, or if you would look, of course, always by the place of birth, after the Second World War, you have, of course, a huge inflow of great Central Europeans to England and US, and then you find, of course, other people like von Mises, you know, who was born in Ukraine, Professor Vanya, Gershenko, Leontiev, Lerner, Minster, Domar, Georges Grogan, Adelman, Kaldor, and of course, Skolnay, who is mentioned in such books. Then I look at the new Palgrave dictionary, and I found these who are bold, who come from this area, but none of them is from particularly from what you can call Slovakia. Then I said, okay, you can find such people in a dictionary of dissenting, non-mainstream economists. Yeah, and this dictionary edited by Arestis and Sawyer, of course, brings some people from the area, the revolutionary contribution, you know, especially so some are like Baran, of course, Bukharin, Rosa Luxemburg, Kaletsky. Yeah. Then I stopped to look at these general works. Let's look at specific work. Do we have a book which has economic thought in our region, like in a post-communist and communist region? There is a textbook by Professor Wagener from Frankfurt, Viadrina. He mentions like eminent 19 economics from the territory. It includes the East Germans, the Poles, the Czechs, Josef Goldman, Václav Otashik, and Miroslav Toms, Yugoslavian, of course, a lot of Russian and Hungarian, but nobody from the area. So then I went to then I found one additional one. Havel, Klacek, Kosta, Schulz, economic system and change in Czechoslovakia, and in the early book they don't mention anybody from Slovakia, except Evgen Lerber, who of course had an important role, but typically after he left Slovakia in the US. Yeah. So then, of course, you need to go and find our own sources. So if you want to see the sources which write about history of thought of Slovakia, you find it only basically in Slovak sources. It's Slovakia and the Slovaks, concise encyclopedia, representačný biografický lexikon Slovenska, and there are people mentioned whom I will mention a little bit later. Then I look at contribution of people from the university, Lisi Petričová, Čaplánová, Petričová, Lisi, and others, and of course, and there should be sources which I didn't know, but then I got a picture, you know, like where I can place this small research of mine. So, I will not passingly, you know, go through different periods, so to have like the last 10 minutes to cover share. So, of course, if you go too far, like, you know, 17th century, you find great scholars, and Schumpeter raised this point, not particularly Sentivani, but in Schumpeter, History of Economic Analysis, 1955, which is Schumpeter only passed, but his life published later. In that book, he writes about the contribution until like 17th, 18th century of Jesuits to the intellectual contribution. Of course, and Sentivani was of Jesuit order. He taught at Graz and Munich, and finally settled in Trnava. And he, you know, there are discussions of which nationality is he. I think Sentivani would not care. Jesuits were cosmopolitan in that sense. Yeah. And he has a book just on that title from 1689, published in Trnava, Selected Problems from Different Sciences. It's just, it's on the hope link for you to Google. It's a Google ebook. Yeah, so you can find it. It goes for you know, it's a very, very huge book, but it has a selection which was called Economia Philosophica, which was published in Trnava, in Cluj and Budapest. That's actually the ebook. Yeah. And then he discusses different issues which are close to what we today would call economic science. Agricultural economics, evidently, some problems of agricultural laborers. He discusses, the longevity of human life, some observations about import duties, comparing different countries, the taxing system. And typically such book, of course, it's like Schumpeter or Pareto, so these are generalists still. They don't write a book about specific issue which today would call economics, and I don't think they were aware that such a general name could be for different activities like mining, agriculture, trade, coins, problems of labor, that they can have their own name like economics. They put it as a part of the intellectual research on society, typically, and some of this short translation here of these books, you are impressed by the general knowledge of these authors. Then there are two great economists connected by a little earlier period who are very highly considered, living in the territory. Gregor Berzevici, surely. So he maybe is one of the most important person of the 18th century here in the territory. Unchovsky, I need to pay respect here to late Ladislav Unchovsky, who actually wrote in Ekonomická Roslavy, which is a journal published here in Slovakia, a lot of very, 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 very good observations about this old 17th, 18th, 19th century history of economic thinking in the territory that requires a knowledge of little Latin, German, Hungarian for sure, and of course Slovak culture. So Berzevici, of course, is I live actually very close to a place where the Jacobins were beheaded in Budapest in 1795. Martinovic and his colleagues. Berzevici was part of this movement. He never returned to Budapest and said this speech. And it was much more safer place if you are Jacobin, in 18th century, than hang around in Budapest or Vienna or Bratislava or Donau. He has different publications and is one of the first proponents of the capitalist economic relation of the approach as was beginning to evolve in England, and very strong critique of feudal structure. Very strong critique, which you see a member of the Scientific Society of Göttingen, 1802. Other one, of course, is, we can skip that, but other one, of course, is Mikhail Andreyevich Baldiansky, who was born in Ochoa, here, but after studies in Pest and Vienna, began to be, was a part of the resettling of a lot of Central Europeans, intellectual and social scientists to the Tsarist Russia. They got really good, if you call it today, a package, including nobility status, if they moved to Russia in the early 19th century. He was rector of St. Petersburg University and has an 8-volume book on national economy in Russian, and then it's translated also to German. And then, Mr. Chairman, how many minutes? 15?
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, yeah. Then, of course, comes an important issue which should be studied. And this is the cameralist thinking at Trnava University in 18th century. Trnava is not far from Vienna. And Viennese University and Prague's are like the Viennese standard considered higher ranking universities. In the Hungarian kingdom, there is no school acceptable at that level. And Trnava Nagyszombat in Hungary is the premier school of the kingdom. If you look there's a lot of studies about, of course, that university. If you look the students who were there, it was always basically in that 18th century. This is the nobility, even higher nobility, but typically those who cannot afford to study in Vienna. Study in Vienna was expensive. Professors who might be closest today to what we call economics are the professors of cameralist sciences, most eminent Kaspar Karl Ehrenfels and Franz Ferenc František Jurkovič's They are at Faculty of Law. These are typically still Jesuit-run universities. Jesuits are prohibited just a little bit later after that. But Faculty of Law is never run by Jesuits. It's run by either church or the city. So it always has more secular character. And then here I bring, their work, and contribution. Unchovsky, especially has a very good piece about Jurkovic himself. Some of them were also Jacobins involved. Then you can have a contribution at the Vienna University and Trnava University. I have this work, even salaries. Salary ratio by my very, very brutal, non-statistical approach between Vienna and Trnava is the same today as it was in 1770. Approximately 5 to 1, 4 to 1, depending whether you take the stars or the regular professors. So their salary ratio basically seems stable maybe for centuries. I have this so they publish things which then teach the classes which called Economica and Politica. But one need to be aware that the word of Economica had at that time different meaning. It was rather something connected with how you run the household, marriage and divorce, and parents and children, master servants. So it's maybe it's quite a lot what we would today call politics, something. Elements, of economics like contracts, coins, laws of war, succession and things. A lot of times belong to the either natural ethics or some special parts of ethics. Okay. But the approach which Cameralists developed, if I may illustrate, the approach which Cameralists developed here remained with us in the 20th century also, and the socialists partially represented this type of approach. So it is the belief in the state, importance of the state. The state should, take care. It's the law. So it's also a policy. You need to have a security. You need to have a censorship. And state take care of the employees. And that was the modernity. So it's 1740, 1780, 1790. This is the modernity. State steps into the social and economic life and began to take care of regulation of the schools, of welfare, poor, health, cleanliness, industry, trade, jobs, a lot of things. So this remained with us a little bit also, basically also in a part of the 20th century. So the Cameralists, and that's what was taught that time, it's not the economics, it is a politics through economic means. They did not care in this tradition with the question of what later is the economic theory or pure economics. Overemphasis of the state, and suspicion that you can generalize in social sciences. That's all the 19th, 18th century German historical school tradition. It is arrogant to think the generalization applied to other cultures. And they did a lot of steps, in this respect to prevent like the so-called Anglo-Saxon spread of ideas to the Central Europe. Shortly about the Cameral High School in Senec, as a part of the modernization, and as a part of some kind of political struggles in Vienna, it's decided, to strengthen the Piarist order against Jesuits, and ask Piarists to create a Collegium Economicum 1763 in Senec. Piarists, very good in mathematics always. Jesuits, so if you go from Jesuit school to Piarist, you need to take special tests in maths even in the 18th century. And this collegium was something like Vyššá škola or something like high school, of economics, and I have a lot of sources, which can go over who were the students, how they were accepted, what was the syllabus, and things like that, and we can skip this, but you are aware of that. Then, of course, you can speak about the great contribution of those who were involved in the national movement, and I just send the names and then go to the modernity. Samuel Deševík, Juraj Fandli, Hostinský Šurík, Štur. There's a lot of issues where he discusses, mostly from ideological point of view, but as we know, economics is also a ideology. It's not only the tools, it's also the ideology. So Stuhl is very deeply involved in that, but is of course strongly anti-liberal, as is Hodge. And now, so 1980, after 1918 comes the golden era of economic thinking, which is then interrupted, in my opinion, no offense intended, after 1948. Even sometimes the same people, continue, and the same people whom we know were great, but ideological pressure of state was strong. The personalities one need to mention, of course, some of them are forgotten. So let me begin with those who left. So Erwin Hexner he left in 1938 when he saw the breakup of Czechoslovakia. He is a professor at Chapel Hill, works at the International Monetary Fund, and ends at Pennsylvania, publishes books about industrial organization by today's standards. Yeah, he's born from Litovsky Mikuláš. He's a friend of Karvaš, but in a really difficult time of decision, Karvaš stays and Hexner leaves. Yeah? Colonel Ivan, who changed his name to Kerno, began to be a deputy of United Nations Secretary General, but published when he lived here, like in Obzor Národohospodářský, things which are on the economic policy, the economic policy of states, these type of issues. You need to mention, of course, Julius Pazman and Peter Zatko. And the great contributions come, so the first textbook, for example, come in economics written in Slovak language, come from Rudolf Pliška, very eminent economist, but if I may say, second in order compared to the Imre Karvaš, and that takes last 10 minutes to contribution of Imre Karvaš. Because I did some work in this. Spoke with his family, had their family archive in certain aspect, with a lot of communities. He was a person involved in a lot of issues. So born 1903, died 1981. So he went through, different periods of our history. S. Schumpeter he is as good in languages. Yeah. Comes from Krupina or somewhere. Comes in 1925 as at Young Comenius University. He graduates with law degree. Marries into important Czech professorial family who is in Bratislava. That helps very much with the scholarships of the 1920s, 1930s by the central bank. Yeah. So you see, during his studies, he visits a lot of universities and schools, has a lot of stays, which was like for my generation never kind of allowed. Yeah, he is at Colorado Springs at the Economic Society meeting 1934. He habilitates 1934. Spends a semester at Stanford. Becomes the extraordinary professor at Comenius University. Yeah. And in 1939 becomes governor of Central Bank of the newly founded Slovak state. Yeah. 1940 becomes full professor at Comenius. He edits Hospodářské rozhlady, which is the main paper which spread knowledge. Something like maybe Business Week or Economist in our comparison. Yeah. Also co-founder of Politica. Has other jobs as mentioned as a secretary. After the war, he is in the Dean of Law School of Comenius University. Yeah. He's a minister of Czechoslovak government, and then governor of Central Bank. Now, of course, one can then, so the difficult questions about Karvaš. How can a liberal or a person who begins with a very good training, who writes already in 20s excellent papers about issues of international monetary, like, in his papers you find Friedman, later discussion is involved about how to interpret French inflation, so-called Poincaré inflation, 1920s, you already find it in Karvaš. It's a talent. Yeah. How can you know, be a person, you know, he was a Czechoslovakist, more maybe but he becomes to be the governor of the central bank under Tiso. So that I really investigated a lot. So it's a story similar in a German world of Hjalmar Schacht. So you have a high-profile professor who basically survives the political regimes, until he succeeds. Karvaš didn't succeed at the end because for his activities he is arrested in 1944 and moved to a concentration camp. So it's for the anti-German activities. He's at Dachau, then later at Flossenburg. In 1946, 1945, of course, he goes out for the camps. There is a trial with him on the Beneš presidency, but the court finds him not committing of war crimes. And he's a dean of Comenius University, but then he is arrested in the 40s and 50s. He doesn't continue publishing. He spends like a large time in a prison. He's moved out forcefully from Bratislava. So he's a member of American Economic Association, of Economic Society. I found on G-Store until I don't know who paid the dues, the fees that time, but he's in prison, but still a member of the societies, at least by the G-Store. So the story, you know, now, so of course, maybe I give a glimpse of the complication first there was a complication of the decision, you know, to stay or to leave. That was a big thing. 1938. In the archives, I found letters from let's say Hebsner to Karvaš, encouraging him to leave the country and stay. He had offers, teachings as Briška had also been making from Leontiev. Briška has offered, and Karvaš had also offers. But they finally they stayed around, and basically the life went to the tragic dimension. So that's maybe about his life. Now contribution, and that's my last point. So Karvaš has begun to write, about monetary issues. So the French inflation and the issues which follow from it for the monetary theory is his first publication in 1920, basically as a 20-year-old or 27-year-old. Then another publication, in Bratislava about that. There is an issue which people were very much interested, not only in him, but also in the 1930s, whether the establishment of cartels in the continent, especially in German and French economies, had an influence on the competition, how still the idea of competition prevails in the world where we have large companies. That was a topic in the 1930s. He has a big book or a contribution in this. It's contribution number 3. In his contribution number 4 is in the line of the tradition. So he begins to investigate the issue of the convergence of the two lands, of the Slovak and the Czech. What are the conditions? How the economic policy of the Prague government helps or not? These issues, whether industrialization of Slovakia is needed or not, if already Czechoslovakia was over-industrialized. These are the issues. When he's a governor, he publishes a couple of pieces about the central bank, about the price stability, and number 7 is his most famous publication, Základy hospodářské vědy, The Foundation of Economic Science, a 2-volume book, which was then re-edited, republished in the early 90s with the help of some foundations and Mikuláš Lukács. Now, my last, comments about him, or could be, you go over the person. Once you read this and some of his more pamphletic literature, you get a picture of the eminent economist. this eminent economist in a sense is that, you know, the Bratislava renamed a square where the central bank is located, you know, based on, it's called now the square of English garbage, yeah? So if you want to generally characterize, you know, his developments, and my last comments about him, and then I finish ready with some questions to answer. So his development is, and I always ask how I would be there. So I feel very close when reading his early papers. Yeah? In the spirit is that's how I look also partially on the and how I think as an economist. Yeah? But then as he writes more and more get involved in economic policy issues, and he lives in a world where you have two strong, passionate, radical political movements with economic consequences, there he slowly began, in my opinion, adjust his views to the pressure. You couldn't stay, or you need to be maybe even stronger, to stay independent at such environment. So you see his books, and you see the chapter about a particular issue, and you see how 60% of the chapter, you know, and how towards the end he suddenly tries to answer what would the fascist actually say if they criticize it, and what would the communist or the socialist. And it's very difficult to avoid that because, you know, you live in such period. So actually, you don't have actually in all the area, you know, people who would be able to keep what we today require from you, some kind of intellectual independence in such difficult political times. Yeah? So he himself moves from liberal to more etatist, social democratic position. He always remains, of course, relatively less critical of Soviet Russia, but much more critical of Marx, calling him a dogmatic, yeah, especially in some micro issues. And of course, that did not help. Maybe helped the imprisonment in the 50s. Yeah. So definitely, maybe in a period after Paul Samuel's contributions, some of you, if you read, don't find him sufficiently analytical. But for his contemporaries, he was a symbol of analytical, founding the statistical department, the central bank, using data in some kind of like Friedman-style basic statistics, yeah? But used them kind of its intuitive, yeah? Strong critic of quantity theory of money, yeah? As a governor also, but also before, yeah, these are the discussions of 1920s, you know, whether to return to gold standard or not. Karvash is always on the position, it is the stability of the price level which not matters. There is nothing, you know, nothing supernatural, as a lot of people believe, including Ricardo, in the gold standard, and we should leave the gold standard is possible, and that is also so they can go to gold standard when he was a governor, yeah. So, as in an old tradition from Stuhl, Hoxha, and before, you know, he is suspicious of what he called speculation. Yeah? The thing has its purpose, and for that purpose, it's to be used, and not for the speculative factor. It's not really always clearly explained what he means, but it goes through his work. Yeah? Yeah? He has a lot of empirical work comparing, you know, economic policies of Czechoslovak government and the role of Slovakia, and a strong proponent of industrialization of Slovakia. Yeah? Very strange opinions on the concept of time in economic theory. Yeah? Karvaš, in my opinion, is not skillful in any calculus, and that's seen on some of his comments, but are very bright, but it's a little bit come from different world, you know, as we think today. A lot of emphasis on morality in economic policy making. Yeah. Well, he's aware of the, you know, in the after World War, he publishes some kind of pamphlets in which he kind of warns that, you know, what he calls socialization process should be strengthened to avoid revolution or revolutionary conflicts, which anyway they came. Yeah? He is a part of the pan-European movement. He writes about the natural emergence of European integration, you know, in the later times, even if the divisions between the countries are so big. In that sense, there is some vision of him. Okay. Yeah. So basically, maybe I think I will finish with this. So, if any question, I'm happy to answer if I can. Thank you very much for listening.
So, did you want to comment maybe on the sort of most recent developments
Okay.
after the war?
Okay, so the most interesting things are later. So,
yeah, 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
We can
So I actually, went through like the socialist period and tried to, take out people who definitely might call contributors. Yeah. Like, for example, Professor Herwig is one of the most controversial. He's already in the central bank under Karl during Second World War. He got Rockefeller Fellowship in '46 and goes with Briška to I forgot Stanford or Yale. Yeah. But when Briška comes home and publishes article about consumption function and the different concepts which appear in kind of mathematical using mathematical weaponry, heretic switches. And in 1951, he publishes an article about reactionary approach of Keynes and all his other followers, and of course, but he stays to be eminent professor, one of the most educated people during the socialist period. People say Professor Heretic, Professor Filkus, Koch, who did the work on strengthening the Soviet national, interpretation of the Czechoslovakian previous history. Yeah. Now Lashchak, eminently, this is dynamic modeling, optimal programming. So in the 1980s, you see a quite strengthening of the retooling happens. Retool. So you begin to have people. Optimal programming books are translated. Yeah. So one can be critical to the socialist period on the ideological base, but maybe it's very difficult to be critical to a contribution like what Professor Lazarchik and some others. Lazarchik left. He finished at Brooklyn College. Lobel, of course, was important, but began to be an important player later outside economic. Mikola Grutáč, Professor Okali, and of course Unchovsky, who writes, so works in operational research. A lot of the things of the micro, especially gets to the teaching and classes of the 1970s and 80s in Moscow, but also here through operational research and optimal planning problems. Yeah, that's how it's called. It's a hidden kind of micro because ideologically you couldn't, stochastic processes and models. Yeah. So these are very strong, and especially Uchovsky's contribution in the history of thought, as I mentioned. I have a great respect for him. So now when the period finishes, the socialist period, that's today. Yeah. And we have these two processes that, in the rankings or so, we are not progressing so much. So I see a lot of young people, who basically try to either go to commercial sector in Bratislava or be analysts there or work in some institutes outside of the universities, but universities a little bit behind, and the certain immigration maybe continues. So sounds more comments. Yes, madam.
I just read an article actually about how anti-Semitism influenced non-South in Austria. It just came out. So how was there anything parallel here in Slovakia?
In Slovakia, well, of course, this is a sensitive issue, especially like those eminent people who I mentioned. They were active in the 1939, 1940, 41. But this kind of a good consciousness, I can say, that actually even in these very difficult times, like especially Carlos, behaved very, very nicely. And actually the Jewish community not far from here, there is a label thanking the contribution of Karvash and during the Second World War. So there is something like that. After Second World War, well, especially in the maybe in the trial with Snitsky, the global Freyka were imprisoned, when Joseph Goldman was imprisoned. You had this period, but maybe that weekend after 19 later. But this is a very complicated question which would require additional thinking from me and maybe from others. Yeah. Yes, yeah, Martin? Yes.
Thanks very much, Julius, because that's so wonderful that we have someone who does the tough job to go through all this and enlighten us on this perspective, which we usually like because we have to do all the regressions, equations. But can you just go to the first slide of about Karvash? Because I was at Basel, because he became like a very senior figure in his, like, he was 23 or so. Like, so he was more, so was this more common in that period that, people had career or became, like,
It was always. So because you have a switch of regimes, yeah? Right. You have a switch of regimes. So early in 1949, 1950, the new editors of economic journals, the Otashik, I don't know. So these are youngsters in the early 20s. Brishka has influence already in, 1928 or 30. Yeah, so and he was born 1908, Karvash 1903. So,
So regime changes.
Yeah, I think regime changes help the young. Yeah. So in 1948, 49, I have somewhere, the members of American Economic Association who were of Czech and Slovak stock, they all basically, except for heretic, began to be persecuted, including English, Nebesage, Macek in Czech Republic, and the new generation came, who after like 10, 15 years began to have views quite similar to those whom they before persecuted. That's our story, kind of.
One thing that I always found kind of interesting and somewhat amusing about Soviet economic thought, in the early 1990s there was a group of economists, or quote unquote, who were sort of writing these articles about the exploitation of the Slovak economy by the evil Czechs, and how Slovakia needed to become independent in order to flourish, and the rosy future that awaits this country if it only gets rid of the burden of the other parts of the country. Do you want to comment on this intellectual stream in Soviet economies at all? And I'm also wondering what has ever happened to these people afterwards?
No. So if you mean like Kochubaisin died earlier, but Sedlak, others, they were quite, influential in the period 1992, 1998, surely under Prime Minister Mečiar. But similar situation you find in the late 1930s. People I didn't mention, who also raised question about the status of Slovakia in Czechoslovakia. But you find similar, with Hoxha and others, in the 1990s. So the nation or that's a topic of maybe which a little bit died out after in the last 10 years. You don't find maybe many people like that, and maybe that's positive.
I had one more question regarding Sidor. How influential was Karol Sidor?
Yes, Sidor was influential, but he was ambassador to Vatican for a period, and belonged to those in the Hlinka party to whom Karvaš would feel closer. So if you read the archive of the Central Bank, evidently, Karvaš belongs to that non-radical group, like not Tuka, not Mach. So of course, there you learn a lot of things. So you need to be practical in life. Karvaš people have contact to some, so Karvaš knew a couple of months before he would be arrested by Gestapo. He always he puts his wife and children away from Bratislava and that time also with you. Yeah, but once, of course, the Germans overstart, not only the Slovaks, yeah? So they arrested him. Yeah? And then, of course, it's a question, how much matter if they beat you up, they change your views. I don't know. That's sometimes also a question.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Well, let's thank Julius for.
Okay, thank you. My name is Julius. The paper I'm going to present is called Venture Capital Finance for Innovation Basis. It's written, it's based on an earlier paper with my former co-author, Karen Fine. And basically, the new paper with similar idea, but I have rewritten the paper from scratch. One can have several perspectives on this paper. One will be from the perspective of industrial organization. From industrial organization, this will be a model of innovation basis with financing decisions. So usually, the industrial organization literature omits the decision how this innovation are financed, and this is what I try to contribute. The perspective of second perspective is the perspective from contract theory. In contract theory, this will be a paper on sequential contracting. So there will be a sequential contract over time under moral hazard. And the final third perspective is perspective from venture capital literature, where this paper tries to say that tries to compare some type of venture capital contracts and basically argue that competition among entrepreneurs might be helpful for the venture capitalists. So maybe you know, maybe you don't. So what is venture capital financing? So usually it's financing of startup projects, which there are some venture capital agencies, and if you have some startup idea, you may apply, for example, for venture capital financing. You can think of it as maybe grant or something of that type. The difference is that the venture capitalists usually provide some form of financing of equity that they take and have a share in your company. And there are several features that are really important for this paper. One is the separation of financing decision and allocation decision. So the financing is done by the venture capitalist, but the allocation decision, what do I do with the finance, is done by the entrepreneur. Important is that it's not observable. In principle, what the entrepreneur does with the money, because the venture capitalist normally doesn't have the expertise on how to have the monitoring device to observe this. Second feature is uncertainty about the outcome. So as I said, it's usually venture capital financing is usually devoted to startup firms, and you may have uncertainty about the skills of the entrepreneur, so whether he's capable of doing the project, or whether the project could be done. So I could announce that I'm going to develop a drug against AIDS, but I don't have the skills, then maybe it's not possible. And so this then creates a moral hazard problem, meaning that the agent, basically the venture capitalist, so the entrepreneur can, instead of investing the money into the project or effort in the project, can deviate and use it for its own benefit, which is not beneficial for the project. There are, of course, solutions to these problems. Usually you write some contract, and in order to incentivize the agent, they provide security design or stage financing, so meaning that usually convertible securities that depending on the progress of the project, or the agent may get bigger share of the pie. The stage financing and monitoring means that there may be some stages which are needed to be completed and which are observable outcomes, and the principal, the venture capitalist may set, for example, deadline for these stages and punish the agent, for example, if the stage is not completed. Monitoring the progress is another. Usually these contractual designs are complicated and may involve additional work, for example, bureaucratic work for the agent, which is not beneficial are also costly, and also the agent may somehow behave in a way to exactly fit into the conditions of the contract, and again this may harm the performance. So in this paper I propose another mechanism, which is the competition between portfolio entrepreneurs. I call it natural mechanism, because through this competition between entrepreneurs, the incentives are improved. There are indeed examples where this happens. So, meaning single venture capitalists financing competition between entrepreneurs which work on essentially the same project or similar project. One of these examples is the National Institute of Health in the US. Was financing several institutions developing a drug release system, or large studies identifying some gene responses for multiple sclerosis. Siemens Venture is the venture capital arm of the Siemens Corporation, was financing, for example, several teams which were developing some product solutions. So I would not say it's prevalent, but it is indeed observed in reality that it's one of financing areas. So in this paper, then, in particular, the main goal or the idea is to show that the competition between portfolio entrepreneurs can be used to alleviate moral hazard, increase efficiency of R&D, and increase the expected profit of the venture capitalist. Just to set down the terminology, so portfolio of entrepreneurs is the entrepreneurs which are financed by single venture capitalists. I will often use the terminology venture capitalists or the principal, exchangeably, and entrepreneurs and agents. And the question, in addition to this main goal, and the question which I will ask is that if the entrepreneurs differ in their skills, the question is, should the less skilled entrepreneur be financed in addition to the more skilled one? And what are the inefficiencies in such contracts? Okay, I'll skip the relation to literature so that maybe briefly I just mentioned that I will be drawing on the literature on innovation races, the classical Lee and Einganum, and the closest paper, and also on this literature which considers venture capital financing with single agent.
Is skill observed? Is that observed?
Skill is observed. Yes. Okay, so let me go to the model. So this is a theory paper, as you can guess, of the model. This will be an innovation race in a moral hazard setting. So there are two entrepreneurs or agents who have novel on their own, and they are involved in patent race. There is a single venture capitalist or principal, I use abbreviation VC, who finances the R&D for both entrepreneurs. If some of the entrepreneurs makes an innovation, this yields a price of R. So you may think as profit which is on the gain on the market from this innovation. And this has to be shared somehow between the venture capitalist and the winning agent of the race. Effort of the agent is not observable, which creates moral hazard problem. The R&D process will be modeled as a memoryless patent race, so a la this classical literature, and you can imagine it as follows. You have a coin, or a die, and in each period you flip the coin. If you get head, you have innovation. If you get tail, you get nothing, and you may continue to execute. The tosses are independent, and the success or the result, the outcome of previous tosses doesn't influence the current probability of innovation. Yeah? So this is the memoryless patent race. Who gets the first? Who gets the innovations first wins the race. There is no benefit from delaying the project, so you announce that you have the innovation, go to the market and win the prize. In order to invest, you need to pay cost of C, which is provided by the principal, and investment, so paying this cost generates a probability of success, which is PI. I is the index for the entrepreneur, so this may differ across entrepreneurs, and this is known in observable.
C does C depend on the period, or is it just sort of
It's constant. It's also constant. C is provided by the venture capitalist. So as I said, the entrepreneur has no well of their own. So the venture capitalist finances it. And in the beginning, also in the basic model, I consider that C is a constant over time and is also discrete variable. So either I pay 0 or I pay C. Okay. Paying C generates probability I, paying 0 generates probability of success 0. The probabilities of the entrepreneurs of success may differ, and this will be reflecting some originating skills. For example, better team of researchers may have higher probability of success. Okay. The costs, I will assume for simplicity that the costs are the same for both entrepreneurs. They differ with potentially the probability of success. Okay, now some assumptions, some of them technical. Individuals are rational, are risk neutral, and have common discount rate R. All information is public, meaning especially, answering the second time of the question, PI is known. Venture capital has all bargaining power and has full commitment, meaning that the venture capitalist proposes a contract. I will say what that contract means in a moment. Proposes a contract with the agents. Agents accept it, potential not, and then they stick to the terms of the contract. So there is no renegotiation. And if the contract, for example, specifies that the agent will be stopped after some time, it will be stopped and there will be no continuation. Full commitment. The only observable and verifiable outcome is the success or failure of the project. So I don't know what happens in the meantime. As a principal, I don't know the allocation of the funds. I only observe if the success was made. And it's winner taking all. As I said, the one who makes the innovation first gets the prize. Now the contract. So you can imagine contract really as a way of contract. So they get some paper that the principal specifies the condition, and the agent accepts it or not. So it's essentially taking or leaving contract. The contract will be specifying the stopping time. So for how much I'm willing to finance you as the agent, maximally, if you don't make an innovation. And will be specified rewards which are conditional on making the innovation in some time. So the earlier you may guess that the rewards will depend on the time, and it's not so difficult to guess that the rewards will be actually decreasing over time. So the contract specifies the reward scheme. If the innovation is made in the first period, that will be the reward. If the innovation is made in the second period, that will be the reward. Third period, that will be the reward. And after the financing is over, essentially the reward is. So I hope if there are questions, feel free to ask.
So what was the decision margin for the entrepreneurs?
I will tell about trade-offs in a moment. So I will be looking for an optimal, meaning profit maximizing contract, which is incentive compatible. So I want, as a principal, I want to induce the agent to work. How do I do it? I promise him sufficient reward so that working is better for him than not working, meaning not investing the money into the project.
But the promise is binding,
So yeah, right. Full commitment, binding promises, yes. And I will restrict, okay, maybe it's not important for the moment, restriction to deterministic contract. No? You may think that stochastic contract is something which in reality doesn't occur, so no. Something happens and then it doesn't die whether you get money or not. So this is, you may not observe the reality. It makes sense in some environment. There will be two benchmarks to which will I compare the setup. One will be the single entrepreneur benchmark, and one will be first best benchmark. First best meaning no moral hazard. This means as if the principal, the venture capitalist, will do all the innovation investment by himself. Okay. And I have here a table that I will indicate in which which benchmark, which case I'm currently in. So first best or moral hazard, single agent, multiple agent. Now the trade-offs. So what is the trade-off for the entrepreneur? The entrepreneur may decide to consume the money. I get the C from the principal in order to invest into the project. I can consume it, eat, basically, or go to a nice hotel or conference or whatever there. Which will be strategy in general called SHIRT, or action called SHIRT. And this gives him the immediate utility of C. Okay. I get the C which I'm supposed to invest, I eat it, I get the utility of C. In this case, there is no success with certainty. And important is that the funding continues to the next period. If I'm single entrepreneur, the probability of funding continuing is 1. However, this will be important effect. If there is competition, the probability of continuation is only the probability that the other entrepreneur doesn't make innovation in the meantime. This is the important effect. That the probability of continuation decreases in competition. Because if I keep the money, my rival may not do it, and he may make innovation. So this decreases my potential continuation of future trends which I can. Okay. The other possibility is to invest C into R&D, general called action or strategy called work, which generates probability with success with probability PI, and at the same time reduces the expected stream of rent. So this is the trade-off for the agent. Future stream of rent, so the continuation of the project which is promised by the principal, versus the current probability of success. And this investment is not observable for venture capitalists. Now, what is the trade-off for the venture capitalist? There is negative effect of competence. So, trade-off I mean now whether to employ single or 2 agents. If I employ 2 agents instead of single, I have duplication of R&D costs. I have to pay the cost twice. But at the same time, I have increased the probability of success. But the most important effect is the disciplining effect, which reduces the incentive for entrepreneurs to shirk. Okay, and this is exactly what I indicated here. The continuation, the future value of shirking decreases under competition, so I may need to pay lower rewards because agents will have higher incentives to work under competition than under no competition. So let me go to analysis. Okay, there will be some formulas here. I will now start with this cell. So single agent and first best. So this is something which is already known in the literature. This is not new, but I want to show it in order to indicate what are the.
So if both of these entrepreneurs invest, yes, they both invest. If I believe that the other guy has a very high probability of succeeding and I don't, then I have possibly some incentive to share.
Yeah.
So that's a company that you can look at, or am I thinking about it wrong?
Yeah, so this, of course, the strength of the discipline effect depends on the probability of success. And in particular, it will be strongest where the probabilities are similar. Yes. Okay. Yes, exactly. You will see when you see this in the result. Okay, so let me know VI, the value of the venture for the venture capitalist. Now, I assume that the venture capitalist is the one who is doing everything, so there is no agent. This is the first best case. Or you can think that the venture capitalist can perfectly control the agent. And the VI is a function of time. And satisfies the following recursive equation. So if I'm in period t, what my value is. So with probability pi, I get the success, I win the R. With probability complementary probability 1 minus pi, I continue to the next period. I get the value from the next period, discounted by 1 plus R, and there is minus cost of innovation C. Okay, I hope. Okay. Now, if the venture capitalist has some stopping time, meaning that there is some deadline how long I'm willing to finance, then this recursive equation is a terminal condition that there is the value in the next period is zero. On this some technicality, so instead of solving it in this discrete time, I'm going to transition to continuous time, and one can then solve it, obtains differential equation, which one can solve, and this is the solution. The formula. The second formula. Okay, what is important from this is that I compare essentially the probability with costs and the reward. And if the probability is small enough, there is no employment, meaning it's not profitable to employ the entrepreneur. If the probability is large, about some threshold, I employ the agent or entrepreneur forever. So if there is, in the first best case, if there is no moral hazard, I'm either not financing at all. If I'm willing to finance, I finance forever. The argument is actually simple because it's memoryless process, and after I'm always in the same situation if nothing happened before. So I'm willing to finance it forever. This is again the first test. One can plot the result on this graph, and this is comparison single agent in the first test versus multiple agent in the first test. So multiple agent I can solve it in a similar way. The axes on the graph are the probabilities, P1, P2. This is the threshold for financing, and for simplicity, I assume that the P1 is bigger than P2, so everything is below the 45 degrees line. If P1 is smaller than this threshold, agent 1 is not financed. By assumption, P2 is also below the threshold, agent 2 is not financed. If P1 is larger and P2 is below the threshold, then by the previous result, the entrepreneur 1 is financed and entrepreneur 2 not. If we increase probability of the second entrepreneur, but not sufficiently, then still it's profitable to finance only entrepreneur 1. And if the probabilities get sufficiently close to each other, close to 45 degrees, like I prefer financing both entrepreneurs compared to one. And if I finance both, I finance them forever again. Okay, so there is no stopping time. So this is under first best. I will be comparing then this to moral hazard. Now, what about the contract? So entrepreneurs. Now I introduce the moral hazard. So starting now with this cell, moral hazard single entrepreneur. So I denote EIT, entrepreneur's expected utility at time t. Again, this is a function of time, and this depends on the period I'm in and the score from the contract which is provided. So this is very important now. This is the incentive compatibility constant. So I want to provide a reward to the agent such that he is willing to invest into the project compared to no investment. So I have to compare those two values. With probability I, the agent wins the race and gets the reward SIT, which I promised him as the principal. With complementary probability 1 minus I, he continues to the next year and gets the value for the next year. This has to be bigger or equal than the value which the agent can get if he is shirking. What is this? If the agent is shirking, he gets C in the current period and continues to the next period with probability 1, in which he gets this. This is again, one can easily see that the principal doesn't want to provide rewards which are higher than necessary, so the rewards will be such that this constraint won't hit equality. One obtains again a difference equation which one can solve, transfer the differential equation and solve it. And then the principal's problem is to maximize the profit, which is the value of the venture, minus the expected rewards which I need to pay to the entrepreneur. this has, in some cases, inferior solution. And in particular, so that it means that there will be some stopping time for the entrepreneur, where the principal will say, I will finance you for at most capital sigma periods. And if no innovation is made until then the project is over. It's, of course, if time capital is achieved, I would like to continue, but I cannot do it because from the beginning I would not be able to incentivize this. If the agent knows that there will be continuation, he will have no reason to work, so I have to commit and I have to be able to hold to my commitment. The important result is that the financing under first best is a necessary condition for financing under moral hazard.
That's the question.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of almost the same equation, but just 2 times it, right? Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, now there is moral hazard.
Yes. But then, so when it's now, before it was bigger than C divided by
Okay, yes, the condition is similar. Condition is similar for
Yes.
condition is similar. But before there was 0 in this volt, and there was infinity as a stopping time.
Oh.
So now there is finite stopping time. In particular, important property is that this, the profit of the entrepreneur is increasing in PI. So if I have to choose among 2 entrepreneurs, I will choose the better one. Interesting is the non-monotonicity of stopping time. So this is on the axis essentially, okay, don't worry about the variables and units, but this is essentially the probability of success, and this is the stopping time, the vertical axis. It is increasing for small probabilities, and then it starts to be decreasing. What is the reason for that? Imagine I have a very skilled entrepreneur. Would I be willing to finance him for a long time? No, because he will shirk in the beginning and then do the innovation at the end anyways. So it's very difficult to incentivize the skilled agent for a long time. So that's why this non-monotonicity. So if the probability is sufficiently high, the stopping time is decreased. So the good agent should do innovation early. Okay, now very briefly. So this is the important one. Okay, one can solve it in a similar way. I just tell you the result. No agent is fine as longer than as it would be. Okay, main question is that the venture capitalist, if he has these 2 agents, whether they should employ also the less skilled one in addition to the more skilled one. As I said, if he has to choose only one of them, it will be the more skilled one. But the question is if there are 2 agents, whether the less skilled one should be also employed in order to reduce this competition. Okay. The result is that one result is no agent is financed as long as it would be financed as a single. An agent with the longest stopping time is financed exactly for the same time as it would be financed as a single. This may be in such a short time very difficult to grasp, but what is important from it is that the financing as single is a necessary condition for financing under competition. Skip the intuition and tell you about the results of comparison. So, this is an indication of optimal employment. Again, the axes are P1 and P2, probability of success. This is the threshold, it's twice the threshold from the single agent, from the first best case. If you are below the threshold, now nobody is employed. If you are here, agent 1 is employed and agent 2 is not. If you are close to the 45 degrees line, both agents will be employed. In this range, actually the result is I don't know exactly. I know that agent 1 will be employed for entrepreneur 1 and maybe in addition agent 2. But now comes the interesting comparison. This one. So this is employment under first best from the previous figure. And the most interesting range which I want to indicate is this small v there. There, because because it's below the black line, I employ only agent 1 under first best, but I employ both agents under molar hazard. So this is something which doesn't happen in the single agent case, because in single agent case, whenever I employ him under moral hazard, I employ him also under first best, but here for the worst agent, it may be the opposite. So the inefficiency goes in the other way. I employ so in that range, I may employ the less skilled agent too often. And this is the effect of the competition, that he reduces the incentive of the more skilled agent to share. Okay, there is some proposition about that also. And final result, very briefly, which I would say is, who is finds longer? This is an interesting question. So if I have two agents with different skills, who might finds longer? There are two immediate answers. This will be entrepreneur with the higher probability of success. This is not correct, because even under single entrepreneur, it was not the case. And it turns out that it's actually the entrepreneur whom I would finance longer in the single case. And this is the picture showing it, but it's exactly the agent whom I would finance longer as a single agent. And the intuition is similar. If the agent is very good, we should make an innovation early. And even if I have a bad agent, the contract looks like I stop the good agent early and continue financing the bad agent. Okay, so this skip and to conclude, so this was a model of innovation raises under moral hazard. The main message is that competition helps to alleviate the moral hazard. The less skilled entrepreneurs can be used to discipline the high skilled one, and even the inefficiency is that the less skilled entrepreneur is financed more often than he should in some cases. And this is not present in the starting model, this is also not present in the simulation.
So let's take more questions maybe after, because we need to move on quite over time. So feel free to approach again after the session to a question. I'm sure you'll be happy to respond.
Okay, imagine that you have 1,000 euros and you want to do something with it and you're not sure what. And this entrepreneur comes to you and says, give me those 1,000 euros, I will make magic happen with it. Basically what he offers you is sort of a gamble. He's going to invest it. And let's say he could either have two outcomes. A good one, high outcome, where he is 5,000 euros. For the bad outcome, where he gets you nothing. No money is gone. This is a sort of a gamble, but it's a pretty good one. And for this paper, we will just, in this example, we will assume that all clients are risk neutral. And making them risk averse doesn't change anything. It just introduces some complications. So let us just take the consumer, you, as a risk neutral person. Now, think of it, the outcome is realized, either the low one, you lose everything, or the high one, but you do not know this. The investor knows this. What is this investor going to tell you? He's going to say that it's the low one. Now, for his whole research, we will focus on incentive-compatible contracts. The relation theory tells us that this is possible. So obviously, the consumer has to offer something to the agent to tell the truth. And what does he have to? He has to offer him a success fee. And now, how high should the success fee be for the agent to tell you the truth? And the high outcome is there. slides here. We have here the client, you, we have here the agent. Agent, you offer him action. You say, if the high outcome is realized, you get a success fee. Agent either has a low outcome with probability PL, or the high one, the low one is actually 0. So what success fee do you have to promise to the agent to make him give you a truthful report? Let's say it's a high outcome, yeah? So the agent can lie, keep this 5,000 euro in his pocket, or he can tell the truth. But in the case of the truth, he must keep this 5,000 euros. So the success fee is actually the whole gain you could get. This whole high outcome. Now, that's kind of okay so far, but what if the clients actually have an alternative outside option? And let's say that this outside option is actually lower than the low outcome. What happens to this market? It disappears. Okay? Because the client thinks, oh, I will end up with 0 anyway. And once I've given 5,000 euro to the investor, the magic has happened. Whatever is the outcome, the agent will have to take 5,000. But let's say I have an outside option of somewhere in the middle, say 1,000 euros. It's better for me to choose that. But this is not optimal. Yeah? For nobody, this is a good case. Even the agent is not happy with it, because the agent doesn't get any clients. So what can the agent do in this case? He has to give a guarantee to you, yeah, that he will not be a bad guy. He actually has an interest to set up a regulatory organization. We call this a self-regulatory organization. So, okay, a self-regulatory organization. And you can imagine that this organization is going to investigate its agents whenever the low outcomes realized. But it does have a certain probability. It's not going to investigate all the low outcomes. And so now we have an interesting case. We have the success fee, which you can call the carrot for the agent to behave well. You can also have a stick. Stick of the self-regulatory organization. He will investigate the agent. If he finds out the agent was lying, he'll take away all his profit. Now, if you think of it, what will this self-regulatory organization do? In the end of the day, it's set up by agents. So it maximizes the profits of all the agents. Will it use the stick a lot? Well, think of it, the more it uses the stick of investigating, the lower clients have to give success fees. So actually they are going to optimize it. They're going to set actually an investigation probability that is probably not high enough. Because in this way, you as a client have to offer quite a big success fee to the agents. Okay. Another thing is, of course, investigations are not for free. Once the SRO steps in, starts to investigate that there's a cost given by the SRO. So you can think of it. I said, we look at incentive compatible constraints or incentive compatible contracts. So as a client, you have to think about this. What am I going to offer to this agent? And then here we have actually the stake, the punishment, investigation probability. Here we have going from 0 to 100%. On the vertical axis, we have the carrot, the success fee for each deal. And what kind of relationship would we expect here? Well, if the investigation probability is 0, it's like having no self-regulatory organization, you have to give a high success fee. If you increase the investigation probability, say to 100%, you don't have to offer any success fee anymore. So this will be an increasing function. It will be something like this. It's not a straight line. Why not? Well, we assume that agents are risk averse. By the way, so far, let me make this clear for anybody who is going to leave in a minute. This is so far not my model. This is a model from the Mazo and other authors published in the Review of Economic Studies. So I'm still explaining the basic setup. So this is the one graph that's important. Any of our offers will be on this red line, so that the contract or offer is incentive compatible. Now we also can draw the same graph, the ISO profit curves for clients, and let's think, how does that work? Yeah? Obviously, let's say we start somewhere in the middle of the vertical line. The higher the success fee, the worse for the client, of course. But what if we move to the right? Investigation probability increases, but investigations have to be paid. They have to be paid by the client. So actually, this line is going to be downward sloping. So if you go a bit to the right, we increase the investigation probability. The client has to pay the expected cost for this. So to keep them on this ISO profit curve, we have them also to lower the success rate. And then we keep them so that these are real ISO profit curves. We can draw several of these. And the slope of this line is basically the cost of the investigation. And we go a bit to the right, increase the cost of investigation, so we have to go down in the success rate with the cost of investigation. Actually, weighted by the probability.
The cost is increasing the probability.
Yeah. So if the SRO never investigates, then you don't have to pay investigation cost. But if they pay to a 10% probability, then you have to pay a higher
over time, long-term cost.
Yeah, we do one-shot gain here, so it's expected cost. You just have to pay the expected cost. You can think of it a one-shot gain repeated with a fixed ending time, or whatever. You look at the one-shot gain. Yeah. So we see that for the client, increasing profit means going down to the left. Lower success rate and actually less investigation. So it's maybe a bit funny, but less investigation is actually good here. But of course it cannot go too low, because for that we have the other figure, the incentive compatibility. So then if we combine these two figures, and we think that clients have the lowest acceptable profit, they have an outside option. So whatever you get, it should be higher in expected terms than the outside option. We draw here now the incentive compatibility, and what will the SRO now choose? What would be the welfare or the client maximizing point? And that would be, well, you would like to give the client as much as possible profit, so you go down, 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 down. And we see this is the lowest point, or the highest profit we can get. Because if you go below that, we cannot offer an incentive compatible contract. So this would be the optimal. We would like the self-regulating organization to choose this point. What point is the SRO really choosing? Well, the profit for the agents is increasing in the success fee. So they go as much as possible up. What is their constraint? Well, they cannot go past above the thick black line. So they will go exactly there where the thick black line and the red one cross. Actually kind of squeezing out everything out of the client. Yeah? The clients actually get is just slightly more or equal to their outside option. Completely squeezed. Maybe we would have we could call it a competitive phase. Now, what you can think of, so I said, well, our clients have an outside option, but that is a bit more realistic. Clients have different outside options. Yeah? There's a sort of distribution outside options. So what you do then as a whole is not squeezing out the one with the lowest, but you are optimizing those of them. So the more you squeeze them, the less clients you will have. The less you squeeze them, the more you have, the less profit. We find the optimum there. So we can actually think now of this black line, not as the lowest, the outside option, but as the level of outside option that maximizes the number of clients that you get into the system times your success fee. And then again, the intersection of the black line and the red is what the SRO chooses. Okay, so the funny thing is, if you just have clients that have one outside option, if they're not heterogeneous in it, you get actually the monopoly outcome, you're completely squeezed. Now you get something in the middle. But generally, you do not just have self-regulatory organizations. You also have something that's called a government, and it can also regulate. And now comes an interesting question. If you add governmental regulation to this system, will it improve the thing? Or will this sort of crowd out the SRO? And here, my paper is different from the one of the Marshall. The Marshall says that actually governmental regulation helps the whole system. Well, the way I model it, I find it crowds it out completely. So let's have a look how this works. The government can also do investigations. If there's a low outcome, it investigates with the probability P gov. The cost are C gov. And of course, the important thing here is who here has the higher cost of investigation. Government. Government inefficient, you can say. On the other hand, they don't have so much information. They don't know so much about it. They're a branch organization has very good information. Usually they don't have to rely on legal methods to force them to open their books. When you sign up, you have to promise them to show their books and stuff. Just think of it that way. So how does it change this? We now have isoprophet curves when there's only government that are the blue lines. And they are steeper. Why? Because the slope is actually proportional to the cost of investigation. So it's more steep now. Again, going to the left and down, more profit for the clients. We get here, then we draw the graphs, and we find the government maximizing the profits of the clients, in this case, not the agents, goes to the lowest possible point. But notice it is a different point, because these curves are more steep, they are a bit more to the left. If you could force the SRO to do the good thing, it would end up a bit more to the right. With more investigation, the lower success rate. So we can think of this, yeah? Now we have this SRO, and we have the government. And the idea is that the SRO makes first a choice of setting its investigation policy. Yeah, maybe it's just faster. Private parts are usually faster than the government. But we also will see the government actually has an incentive to wait for the SRO to make its first choice. And the SRO thinks, okay, whatever going to happen, the government is going for that point, the blue point. That's where they go to, whatever I said. They will just add up the investigation probability, go to that point. Now, if you think we could move up this line, go to this point, there we draw actually this sort of isocost curve or isoprofit curve using the cost of SRO. And the SRO could actually sit there, setting the same investigation probability, but actually having a higher success rate. And you think, oh, okay, if the government is anyway going to step in, setting a high investigation probability, which we don't like, but they're going to do it anyway, we might as well go in ourselves, set this high probability, and then still get a higher success fee for our agents. Of course, they can play around with this, and then find somewhere in between here the optimal point, because if they lower the success fee, you have again more clients. It depends on the distribution of outside options for clients. And so then we see what happens then. Basically, the SRO will set the investigation probability exactly at the level that the government would set if they were alone. The government actually sets nothing. And that's actually probably optimal, because the SRO has lower costs than the government. So this is actually great. That's a great outcome. So basically, if you think about it, how many minutes do I have still?
About 10.
That's a lot. So this is the model of Marzo et al. And basically you could say they make sequential moves. First, SRO chooses the investigation probability. Then in stage 2, the government does this. Stage 3, customers, clients offer agents a contract. Stage 4, outcome is realized. Is the money destroyed or is it tripled or times 4 or 5? Stage 5, agents will decide, truthful or deceive. We set up the thing that they will choose truthful. Then in stage 6, low outcomes are being investigated by the SRO with this probability, by the government investigating this probability. And then, so the next paper, I was working on this with Andreas Orman, we were doing an experiment on it, and I felt kind of uncomfortable with this setup. So I said, oh, you know, why is this a sequential move? It turns out, if you think of it, let me just talk about all this. If you think over it, it is not really a sequential game, right? What happens is that in stage 1, SRO announces a probability. But it's not something you can observe, because this is something that's going to be implemented over a period of time, maybe over a year. What happens then is actually, you could say, is that in stage 2, so SRO, well, yeah, maybe they can preempt by announcing, but actually the second stage is that they simultaneously choose. Because you can only, after a year, you say, okay, how many low outcomes were there, how many investigations were there, you divide one by the other, we have a good estimate for probability. Now what the Marzo et al. Did, of course, is SRO announces a precise probability, and we get all these other stages, and now there's an extra stage 7. What happens in this stage 7? To make it into a sequential game, well, SRO is checked. Did they really set the probability that they announced? And if not, they have to be punished severely. Otherwise, it's not incentive compatible for them. And if you do this, you get actually these sequential moves that the Marzo et al. Have in the paper. Now, can the government really trust the investigation probability announced by SRO? Yeah, like in real life, this is really a good modeling choice. Well, so one of the examples were some financial institutions, the New York Exchange Board and another organization. So I looked at them, and actually they merged into one organization, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, and I found some more information on them. Through our aggressive vigilance, we brought 1,535 disciplinary actions, etc., etc. Also found something like FINRA does not open investigations for all investor complaints. So far the model seems to be a good approximation. But it seems FINRA is not announcing a percentage. It would be a bit strange actually. We are going to investigate all low outcomes with a probability of 24%. You never see that. You probably say something like, we investigate cases according to best practices. So no way that you can, in the end of the period, really go back to them and say, oh, you didn't follow up. We cannot give them a punishment for this. You would need very strict regulations if you would really want to enforce this. But that changes the game. The game is now that in stage 7, it's not what SRO is checked. SRO is actually not checked. Even if there may be some check, I doubt if any real serious penalties come out of it. Yeah, so actually then you come into a case of simultaneous moves. Okay. Everybody agrees with this? Yeah, yes. You agree? Very good. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. Okay, so this is actually the whole thing. Yeah? This is actually my introduction of the paper. And then we get 9 pages of the deliberations, lemmas, and proofs.
6 pages of dense notation in the appendix. And then I get this. Oh, these are
So you're skipping the important part?
you can read it. I will send you my paper. Yeah? These are the response functions. Yeah? So what do we see of the simultaneous game? You see that in the sequential game, the SRO chooses a high probability, and then the left down column is 0. It chooses a high one, the government chooses nothing. But you see in the simultaneous game, the only point where they actually overlap is up there. Well, actually, only the government sets its probability, and the SRO sets nothing. Maybe look at this example here. Yeah, if you think, well, the best would be if the SRO chose a high outcome and a high probability, investigation probability, the government the low one or none. Right? Because you see the outcome would be the best actually. 11 for the SRO, 30 for the government. I chose some parameters, yeah, I calculated everything through. You can have different versions of that, we did that too. This is one version, but they all have this structure. This is the best. But could this be a Nash equilibrium in the simultaneous game? Well, no, right? Because the SRO could earn more. It could earn 17 instead of 11. So no, it will not choose high. Could this be a Nash equilibrium? No, because the government would choose a higher probability. Could then that be a Nash equilibrium? No, SRO would choose none, 40 is higher than 10, and then eventually say we end up in this corner. Funny enough, the proof almost works a bit following this intuition, even though it's more abstract. It's a very general proof too, very general. Let me see the actually the worst outcome. Okay, so then I had also we had some experimental data on exactly these setups. So I ran some experiments. I don't know, we had 120 students in groups of 4 or something. You actually got the paper for review.
So I should remember.
Yes, yes. Okay. Anyway, this is what we see. And what do we see? In the first round, people choose very low choices. No, sorry. On the vertical axis are the proportion of people that choose choices that are the Nash equilibrium. See, in the first round, this is very low. And the dark one are individual choices, the open one, the paired choices. But we see that both actually are going up. In the last few rounds, it's like 80% or higher. And we did some robustness tests, and we see also this trend going up. So basically, actually, you could say that our data pretty much support this, this theory. We really see this if you have people play this. So what is the conclusion of this study? Well, for the simultaneous game, there's strong support. We actually did also some studies, experimental study of the sequential game. This is a different paper though. We find support, but it's actually much weaker. It turns out that it's much harder for them to play a sequential game. Actually, a very clear policy advice comes from this. Yeah? You should try to assure this realization of the highly efficient sequential play as found in the Marzone. But we can only get that if we require the self-regulatory organization to do these things. They should announce a precise investigation probability. They should give a number in. This number should be really legally binding, should be checked, and deviation should be really severely sanctioned to make truth-telling of the announcement incentive compatible. Only in that case we have the sequential game as in the Marzo, and we get this nice outcome. If not, we come to my more miserable model, where we get a very bad outcome. That's it.
Yes, so can you deduce the number of cases invested from the cost space? So if the SRO has how to reveal the books? In reality, in the models. In the model, you could do it, and then you could, if you propose these remedies, the punishment could be
Yes.
based on the difference between the actual budget which is devoted and
So you say, okay, you should go to an accountant, and this accountant says this is the cost, and you can deduce from this. Yeah, I guess that would be a possibility. Yeah. So that's a possible other solution. Yes.
because that would be also, because you suggested civilly punished, but maybe even mild punishment for mild deviations would help.
Okay. I guess that would be an interesting second paper. This is just as a solution suggested.
Yes.
It's not the gist of the message. But thank you. That's an interesting one. Yes.
What would happen if the government checked occasionally and the self-regulating organisation was punished if the government found misbehaviour that had been missed by the self-regulating organisation?
You know some cases about this?
No.
Oh, okay.
But would that be not another alternative?
Yeah, maybe.
More realistic than...
No, I think that this is sure very interesting, but that's of course not the body of my message. Body of my message is, if you don't be careful, it becomes a simultaneous game, outcome will be bad. So you have to do something. We're now talking about is doing something, but this is actually 5 lines in my conclusion.
Because the problem with announcing a precise investigation probability is I think having it ambiguous is more if the sort of phrase is more ambiguous, it's more effective. I think it's made experimental developments on this that ambiguity increases the force of investigation.
You think that adding ambiguity would help here?
In general,
Maybe I don't see how this would help really, but the thing is you have to keep this SRO that it doesn't just make any announcement. Because in my model, the SRO maybe makes an announcement, but the government does best to just ignore it and just calculates what is the outcome of the simultaneous game. It is one-shot game. We don't have different types of SROs. We don't have pooling or separating equilibrium, nothing of that. So then actually the announcement of the SRO is just cheap talk of the first round. How to make this cheap talk credible. That would be the idea of it. Avoid the bad outcomes of my model. Other questions?
Thank you.
So, Andradovich is a collaboration with a colleague of mine, or a former colleague of mine, I should say. And it's an experimental paper. What we are doing here is something very, very simple, almost to the point of triviality. Okay, so, but you can be the judge, but at the very least it should hopefully be entertaining. But what we were after originally is something that we thought was, and what we think is quite fundamental to pretty much all of the economic theory, including decision theories that we have in existence, and of course the game theory as well. Okay? So it's a test of one axiom that is underlying pretty much all of the decision theories that we currently have in the literature, not all of them, but virtually. In particular, it's an axiom, a monotonicity axiom, which is underlying subjective expected utility, which is of course the foundation for game theory and so forth. Okay? Now, this axiom is so intuitive and it's so sort of straightforward that we wouldn't even suspect doubting it. Okay? It's something that people, or economists in particular, did not really feel any kind of urge or motivation to test the data. Again, because it's so compelling. Okay? However, psychologists disagree, or not disagree, but psychologists have done experiments of this sort, and they basically provide us with data sets that suggest that this axiom might be violated by a substantial proportion of individuals. Okay? And so now we take these studies seriously. whether we can replicate these results in a design that sort of cleans up a lot of the features of the psychology experiments that we did not think were essential for the theory and perhaps not desirable. Okay, and so this is what we are essentially doing. So let me show you what the axiom of monotonicity is. Right? So the capital letters, you can think of the capital letters as high amounts and the lowercase letters as the low amounts. So capital Y is a higher amount than the lowercase y, and capital X is a higher amount and the lowercase x is a low amount. So now suppose that capital Y is chosen over low y and capital X is chosen over low x. Then, if I confront you with these two lotteries, okay, so now this is lottery left, lottery left lottery, right lottery, they are perfectly correlated, okay, they are perfectly correlated, which means that they depend on a coin flip. If the coin flip comes up heads, then you get, if you chose this lottery, you get Y. If you chose this lottery, you get a capital Y. If it comes up tails, if you chose lottery, you get low X. If you chose lottery, you get high X. Okay? So now it should be very clear and straightforward that all of us should be choosing the lottery R which dominates lottery. Okay? And that's essentially what axiom of monotonicity boils down to. And it is essentially assumed. It is assumed under expected utility theory, subjective expected utility theory, the kinetic theory. It is assumed under all of the ambiguity decision theories that are out there, due to Gilbert, Schmeidler, and all these guys. Okay, so it's monotonicity principle. Okay, so this is just for formalizing the idea. Okay, so essentially, if I have two acts or two lotteries, if you will, F and G, and then for each state of the world, if in each state of the world I prefer lottery F to Y, okay, then by implication I must be preferring lottery F to Y on the lottery space. And I already mentioned this, right? So it's underlying lottery decision theories, etc. However, then there are these studies, okay, and it goes back to Tversky and Shafir. I think these guys were the first ones who have run some experiments that suggest, they are not direct evidence, but they suggest that this monotonicity principle might be viable, okay. And then there were a few other people after them, in particular Richard Crossman, who was running an experiment, and then a few others that are listed, okay. But for example, Shafir and Tversky would ask students whether they would want to go to a vacation to Hawaii when they know that they have passed the final exam, okay? When they collected the responses. Then they asked the students whether they would want to go to a vacation to Hawaii. If they know they have failed the exam, they would collect the responses. And they would ask them whether they would like to go to vacation to Hawaii if they don't know the outcome. And they find that about 30% of people would go to Hawaii when they did not know the outcome exam, but would not go to Hawaii when they knew that they had passed or failed. Okay. So from that, they are essentially concluding that the savage shortening principle, which is just a more sophisticated version of the monotonicity axiom, is failing. Okay. And if it's true, I mean, if this axiom is failing, then that's a big problem for economists, okay? Because all these theories are basically founded. Right? So we are essentially trying to check these arguments in this experiment in this paper. Okay. So what we do in the experiment is we minimize context. Okay, so for example, Shafir and Tversky's experiment had the Hawaii unit. Okay, so we minimize the context. We minimize social distance, so we run double-blind procedure, which means that neither the participants in the lab nor the experimenter can relay decisions to the identity of the student. We eliminate strategy uncertainty, which is again something that no other experiment has done. That is, it's possible experimental demand effects, and I will sort of get to that later. A very similar and quite intriguing study is by Ayala Arad, 2011. It's a quite, I think, entertaining experiment where she asks subjects to choose a number between, let's say, 0 and 20, and write a number on the sticker, okay? And then there was a die, and she asked the subjects to place that sticker on one side of the die and roll the die. And if the die came up with the sticker out, they got that amount of money on the sticker. Okay? So what would you do? If you can pick a number between 0 and 20, write it on the sticker, place it on the side of the die, roll the die, and it comes up to be 20. Also, everybody should basically write 20, right? Because the probability is 1/6, the amount has nothing to do with how the die comes up. Well, she finds that about 30% of people don't do that. Okay, so only about 70% of people write 20, and the rest basically they go with some other numbers. Right? Now, her paper, she's arguing that, it's very difficult to rationalize this, right? So there are essentially two possibilities. One is something that has already been argued by I'm not sure by whom, but there is a known sort of theory called magical thinking. Okay, and under magical thinking, you think that your actions can affect the whole world. Okay, but you really have to go into a little bit of metaphysics here. Okay, if you want to think that way. The second possibility, and I think her argument is about that, is based on some sort of greed argument. Okay, some sort of greed argument combined with superstition. So that, for example, suppose that I go for the 20, that's kind of the greedy action, right? I want the whole pie, and then whenever in my past experience, whenever I went for the high prize in my life, I usually got slapped on my hand. So maybe some subjects are affected by superstitious feelings. But again, you have to really get outside the traditional economic thinking to be able to formulate such an argument, however it will be done. But you see that there is a lot of evidence out there, and the evidence out there is suggesting that monotonicity is fairly for about 30% of our subjects. And 30% margin, that's quite significant, yes.
Is that robust to like the usual thing, like increasing the payoff, giving them some more time?
Well, so in her paper, she has 3 experiments that are different. But yeah, that's the experiment of Erasmus check. Shafir and Tversky, they do sort of scenarios. They do in way of survey more. Okay? And Rachel Grossman runs Prisoner's Dilemma. Okay? So in one treatment, she just had Prisoner's Dilemma, and in the other treatment, she asks the subjects before they choose actions in Prisoner's Dilemma whether they think their opponent will cooperate or deflect. Okay? And she finds that in the treatment where she does not elicit those beliefs, there is 30% higher cooperation rate than in the treatment where she does. Okay? And she kind of relates it to this sort of what they call disjunction effect in the psychology of religion. Okay? But yeah, that's the extent of the philosophy. Alright, so let me go on. This is our experiment. We have 4 tasks. The first 2 tasks are just what you see on the board. Okay? So we basically ask the subject whether they want 75 pesos or 85 pesos. This was done at the time while I was still in Mexico City on my former job. And the second task, we just asked them, do you want 25 pesos or 85 pesos? Okay? Those are the first steps. If you are nervous about it, we can discuss that later. Okay? Because our referees are nervous about that. Okay, so now this is the key task, right? So now we construct these lotteries, right? We construct the dominant lottery and the dominating lottery. So on the left we have the dominating lottery, and on the right we have the dominant lottery, and it's perfectly correlated by an explicit bingo cage that's in front of the laboratory, and basically from there one student is randomly selected to pick a ball and get this, right? So monotonicity axiom essentially implies that everybody should go right. Okay, everybody should choose the right direction. Alright. Okay. So question. If we observe, in the task 3, in this task, left is chosen, can we reject axiom monotonicity? Okay, that's the question. And there are these two potential identification problems. Okay, first problem. So suppose that the subject chooses the lower R. Okay, so this has to do with subjects choosing the low amount in the first two tasks. Okay, so this has to do with the subject actually choosing less money when they could have chosen more money for sure. Right? So if that happens, then the antecedent, right, because maximum obviously is an implication, so unless we establish antecedent, the implication is vacuous, right? It doesn't say anything. So if that happens, then what should we think? Well, now we need a theory. So we need a theory why a person would choose a lower amount. And if we have that theory, now we can reestablish the constituent, right? Now we can establish a test for the axiom. Alright, so there are three sort of theories that pop in our minds. First is the subject just somehow made a mistake. Okay? And if they really made a mistake and they chose one not by mistake, then we are still fine. The dominant lottery is still dominant and the dominant lottery is still dominant. Second reason is that this is due to preference. The subject maybe prefers less money. Okay? Maybe prefers less money. Is it crazy? Well, maybe. But at least IOR tells us, okay, that perhaps there is some superstition, some sort of greed argument that might create reasonable preference for less money whenever you can grab more money. So it could be due to preference. But if it's due to preference, then our constructed lotteries are not anymore correct, right? It's not that the dominant one is not anymore dominant and the dominant is not anymore dominant. You would actually have to use the choices from the first two tasks to construct them appropriately. Okay, so that the dominant lottery would have the revealed preferred amounts, and the dominant lottery would have the revealed inferior amounts.
Do you know that this lottery choice is coming up when you're doing tasks?
Yes, you know everything. Yeah. All four tasks are explained at the very beginning of the experiment. So the instructions are read and everything is revealed to you at the beginning of the experiment.
Because the superstition argument would not work if you don't know that the lottery is coming, I guess, right? Because then it's like, yeah, I have 75, I have 85. I don't know that any lottery is coming where I could be.
Yeah, but that's true, but you know something is coming. I mean, we can't. Yeah, we know something is coming, I guess. But you are. If you didn't know at all, then I did. But the instructions basically summarize or explain the whole experiment at the beginning, so they know exactly what's coming. Then they just go through this stuff. Okay, but it could also be something else. So what is that something else? Well, this is becoming popular in experimental literature these days, and it's called the experimental demand effects. Okay, and I'm particularly sensitive to that. But it could be something like, all right, so you are asking me to choose between 75 and 95 pesos. So what's the catch? Okay, this is a trivial choice. Okay, what's the catch? And I'm going to start looking for that catch, and perhaps there is something I missed in the instructions. So now I'm starting to question my understanding of the instruction. Maybe there was something written that I missed, okay? And now I'm becoming completely uncertain and I'm going to choose the low amount just in case, okay? So this would mean that I as an experimenter would have lost control, okay? If this were to happen, it would be something else. Now if that's the case, so then when I see a subject that should choose the low amount, then what I want to do as an experimenter, as a researcher, I want to toss over that data. Okay? If that's the case, I don't want to consider data. I only want to focus on people who have chosen the high amount, who have decided to really follow the instructions. Okay? And in fact, that's what we'll do in the end. Okay, so we address all these three things, right? So if it's mistakes, then we have this is still dominant lottery, this is still dominant. If it's the preferences, then your preferred amounts are dominant lottery, this is dominant. And if it's the experimental demand effect, then we want to only focus on the subjects who have chosen the high amount. Okay? Identification problem 2. This has to do with the formulation of the decisions or space-based decision theory by Savage. Okay? How? Well, in Savage's world, it is not the physical states of nature or state of the world that matter, but rather the relevant states. Okay, not the physical states, but the relevant states. So what are relevant states? Well, even if there is a state of the world that does not physically exist, but for some reason I think that it might exist, it becomes relevant to my decision, and in that case it is covered by the Savage's theory. And if that's the case, then I cannot reject axial monotonicity, because now my state space is expanding. I now have this virtual, what is called the Newcomb state, included in amongst my state of the world, and the monotonicity axiom does not apply anymore. Okay, so it cannot be rejected. So let me show you how that works. You see that in our experiment, I only have up and down. Okay, so only physically there are only two options, either up or down, right? Depending on whether the number from the bingo cage that's selected is above 20 or below 20. Okay, there are 40 balls in the bingo cage. However, somebody might think that there might be this middle stage, okay, and the middle stage, if I choose the left lottery, I might be thinking, if I go for the not greedy choice, right, I might be thinking that I'm going to be somehow rewarded, and it's going to be the high outcome, right? And if I go for the dominant lottery, so I go for the greedy choice, I might be somehow punished, and the lottery will turn out to be the lower amount. Okay? If that's the case, then I have to introduce the middle state of the world, and if I do that, my axial monotonicity does not apply anymore. Okay? Because the antecedent is violated. Alright. So that can be the case, and we are going to address this thesis, and this is called the Newcomb paradox. So we are going to try to address it somehow in the experiment.
Is there a difference, empirical evidence, on different choices in correlated and uncorrelated lotteries? So here you have coin flip.
It is perfectly correlated, yes.
So here you have a coin flip, right? So here,
I mean, you have two different coins. You flip one from left and the other.
Just sort of thinking very clearly, uncorrelated versus correlated lottery choice. And personally, I would be more sure about the right in the correlated lottery choice, because I'm saying whatever the coin flip, I end up better off with right. When they are independent, I can see more space for superstition.
Yeah, that's right. So I agree. But even if there is a perfect correlation, the flip of the coin, although it's one and it applies to both choices, it happens after you have chosen. So you can still, if you are superstitious to some extent, you can still think that, look, if I go for the high prizes, I'm sure I'm going to be unfortunate, and it's going to be the low price that I will get, right? And if I go for the modest dominated lottery, I might, let it happen. So there is a space for that thinking still. However, if it's, as you say, that should be magnified. I will give you that.
If you have, for example, if you have two and you switch the left rows in the left column the rows, and have 50-50, so that should be something okay. So if it's uncorrelated, it should be the same. But for correlated, maybe.
Right.
So not in this case, but you have up and down, right? And you just 50-50 probability, and you switch the up and down.
Okay.
So negatively correlated.
Yeah, but it's the same payoffs, but just the lotteries are not in the same row, but are.
So we have negative correlation.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyway, so what we do is there's a very basic test. In fact, it's the sort of the strongest test that we could come up with, or weakest test that we could come up with. Okay. So it's basically cleaned up of all the other features of all other experiments that we thought might be responsible for this disjunction effect. Okay. And if we see it here, then that's trouble, right? That's not good. So how do we deal with this Newcomb state? Well, what we do is that we choose explicit randomization device. So we have a bingo cage in front of the classroom. We as experimenters, we don't stand anywhere near it. Everything is run by the subject. So we pick assistants go, assistants draw balls, and so on, just so that there is no suspicion that we as experimenters have somehow rigged something. Okay, depending on the choices that the students could have made. Because that's one reason why we could introduce this Newcomb state. Okay, that's another reason that experimenter knows the choice that you made and then rigs the randomization results. Okay, so that's one possibility. So anyway, so that's what we do. That's the best we can do. Okay. And so this is what the experiment looks like, right? So I already explained that. So if the ball is drawn from the bingo cage is greater than 20, then you get the top row. If it's less, you get the bottom row. Now we have two treatments, but the treatments are really just robustness checks. Okay, we are not interested in treatment effect. It's rather we have a transparent treatment and an obscure treatment. Transparent treatment is where everything is known. Probabilities are known, the composition of the bingo cage is known. We invite subject to, before we load the balls in the bingo cage, we have them spread out on the table and subjects come and see they are really just 1 to 40 and we make them expect that. We go to great lengths to make sure that that we are completely transparent about it. In the obscure treatment, we don't do that. So the difference is that when the subjects come into the room, the bingo cage is preloaded with these balls. And that's the only difference between the two treatments. Okay? So in the transparent treatment, the balls are outside, we invite students to inspect them, okay, they see 1 to 40, then one of the students grabs them, puts them in the bingo cage, not us, and so on. In the obscure treatment, it's preloaded.
Do you know the probabilities in obscure treatment?
In the obscure treatment, no.
So it's ambiguous.
Yes, exactly. So it's ambiguous. And the reason for that is that all the previous studies are in ambiguous type of environment. Okay? So we wanted to really check this with basically risk, okay, in the risk type of environment, and then we wanted to take a step into the ambiguous environment. Exactly. Okay? So that would be a strong evidence. Alright, that's it. Oh, and then at the end, for fourth task is just prisoner's dilemma. Okay, and that's because we wanted to know whether disjunct people or people who violate monotonicity are more likely to cooperate in prisoner's dilemma. That is there a bridge between decision theory and some sort of violation in decision theory and possibly game theory and strategy thinking? Okay, so that's just a matter of curiosity. Okay, so these are hypotheses. You guys understand those already by now. Okay, so here's the data. So first we check the consistency. First we perform consistency checks. The tasks 1, 2, and 4 were identical between the treatments. Okay? The treatments only vary in the task 3 and only in the composition of the bingo cage and the knowledge of subject about the composition of the bingo cage. Right? In one case, they know that the chances are exactly 50-50. In the other case, they don't know what the chances are. Okay? Although they can kind of guess because the bingo cage is up there, so they can kind of see, a problem, so that they can get some information, but they cannot get it precisely.
So it's kind of the contents are observable.
Yeah, it's like the bingo cage is loaded, but I mean you see it from your from the distance of your seat, I guess, and only when you come into the room because then otherwise you are behind the partition. Okay, so you see that in the tasks that are the same between treatments, there are really no significant differences in behavior, which is nice. Okay, that means our treatment variation did not seem to affect the behavior in other. Interesting thing, notice that despite all of our efforts, double-blind, this and that, we still have about 15% of people taking the lower amount in the initial first two tasks. And we have cooperation rates about 45% or so in the business one, which is okay.
You paid for all 4 tasks?
Yes, paid for all 4 tasks. And these were passive, there's one-to-one. So it was like exchange rate was maybe like 10 pesos to the dollar. Okay. So now let's go to the interesting part, right? So really the task 3 is the key test of the monotonicity axiom. So we have obscure treatment and we have transparent treatment. So first I'm showing you the transparent treatment, and the rows are divided according to whether subject chose the higher amount in both tasks 1 and 2 versus whether they chose the lower amount at least in one of those tasks 1 and 2. Okay? So the top row is those are the people who always chose the higher amount. Okay? So those are the people we feel comfortable with. And the other guys we don't really know. We don't feel comfortable with those. But notice that those guys who took the high amount in both tasks 1 and 2, there are no violations. Okay? Out of 82, only 2 people have chosen the dominated lottery, which is manageable. Okay? and nowhere near sort of statistical significance. So this is certainly in contrast with the existing literature, although I must say that our experiment is so boiled down to such a simple thing that it would be unfair to compare it really to the previous literature. But at least the weakest possible test of the axial monotonicity is passing. Okay, so axial monotonicity is good, is healthy, and is alive, at least in the environmental risk. Okay, but then we go to the obscure treatment, and there it jumps up. Okay, so then there we get about 18% of people actually with the dominated waters. And notice that the only difference we had was really regarding the composition of the bingo cage. And it jumps up, and that's significant of 1% level. So while it's not a huge number, it's not over 30% as reported in the prior literature, it's still maybe slightly disconcerting. But on the other hand, as an economic theorist, perhaps we have really not too much to worry about because it's still 15%. I mean, we can probably do that. But it's definitely something that's behaviorally interesting. And then you can see that for the guys who have actually taken low amount in one of the two tasks, they are completely in different universe. Okay, they show violations. They took the dominated choices. Actually, maybe disregard the 72.7% because there's something going on. Some things are going on I don't have really time to explain, but this number is really much more than 42. But still, it's almost over 40% of them choose the dominated choices. Okay.
If it shows less in both treatment and both task 1 and 2, then you can still check your monotonicity.
So they don't. So these are. So it's either in both or at least one. So it's at least one.
But you can still test monotonicity if they choose less in both, because you can just check. They chose the left one instead of the right one.
If they choose in both, you still have the right column. Yes, yeah. You can. But they belong here. Okay. So those guys you throw in there, but you can still test it. You can still test it even if they choose low amount in just one. You can still test it. Why? Because in one condition they actually switch these rows. Right? So you can still test the preference hypothesis. But if you believe in preference, if you believe that they actually chose low amount because of the preference, then they are violating monotonicity to the extent of 72%. So, and that's a lot. Right?
Because 72% choose the right lottery instead of
the right lottery, but now the right lottery consists of the revealed preferred amount, not necessarily the high mandatory amount. Okay, so that's the main difference.
So the correct lottery.
Exactly. Whereas here in this column, it's always the monetary high amount. Okay, so that's why I said that the number 42% is more sort of realistic, because the preference hypothesis is probably not very sound. Although we thought initially that it is, and that's why we switched those columns. But now we think that now we really think that the guys who choose lower amount, I mean that's our best guess now, is probably some sort of EV, some sort of experimental demand effect, some uncertainty, misconception about instructions, things like that. So we really don't, we are not really very much interested anymore in the lower half of the table, only in the top half. I think that's where we have confidence that we get something important. Okay. And this is just for your interest. This is just a prisoner's dilemma. So those guys who have actually violated monotonicity, do they cooperate more in prisoner's dilemma, as would be the implication, right? Yes, but it's not statistically significant. Okay, so no. I mean, the direction goes in the right way, right? 55% versus 49.9, but that difference is actually not statistically significant. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah, there are some theories. So if you now it can be one of two types of people. Okay, you can be either a guy who finds 18% violations a serious problem, in which case you want to abandon all decision theories that are based on state space, including game theory, mostly. And you would want to go with alternatives such as Guild Watch Member 95. This is the case-based decision theory, which does not which does not have this problem, so axiomaticity is Nova Sundar, or AND, which is one of these new models of actually ambiguity aversion, and also doesn't rely on state space. It's kind of based in this, for those of you who know, this Walker and Jeffrey type of alternative approach. Or you are the person who does not find the 18% very important. I mean, it's probably intriguing, but it's maybe not so